We are part of the Xwulqw'selu Connections research team at University of Victoria, and we're presenting here today on some monitoring and modeling results. So just to introduce ourselves first, I'm Tom Gleason.
Hi, I'm Kristina Disney.
I am David Serrano.
And today we're going to talk about both technical updates and some offers to the Watershed Sustainability Planning process, which is a co-governance structure planning and being developed between Cowichan tribes and the province of British Columbia. So in the presentation today, we're going to give you a quick reminder of who we are and how we work and our overall research approach. And I'm going to lead that section. And then we're going to give you technical updates about both the monitoring and the modeling, both what we've done and some key results. And I'm going to hand that over to Kristina to talk about monitoring, and I'm going to lead part of that about modeling, and then hand it over to David to give you some key results about modeling. And in each of these sections, we're going to describe some of what we're offering to the two authority holders in the Watershed Sustainability Planning process, the WSP process, the Cowichan tribes and the province of British Columbia. So the first thing we're offering is insights and approaches for effective community-based monitoring. And the second is appropriate, a calibrated model built for watershed that can be improved and applied. So that's the overall arc of our presentation here. And so we're starting with who we are, and we are guided by rights holders and partners. So our rights holders and partners on this project are Cowichan Tribes, the province, Xwulqw'selu Working Group, and the Cowichan Watershed Board, and we're deeply connected to community. We have a large network of monitors and volunteers that have been deeply involved in our project and very dedicated and contributing a lot of time and effort over the last few years. We like to describe our project through this image of weaving. So overall, we're a funded, independent, collaborative research project. We have these strong established partnerships, and we hope to keep engaging with the Watershed Sustainability Planning process to support evidence-based decision-making using community-based monitoring, watershed modeling, and community science facilitation. So this is a presentation kind of in the middle of our 5-year project, and we're kind of giving you an update of what we've done so far and where we hope to go and how we hope to contribute to the planning process. So this weaving process that we've developed internally and represented that through working with Tyrone Elliott and E. Campbell, it is based on 5 vertical strands or warps. And these are our values and our principles of the most important things that we think guide our research project. And we weave those important values with and between the twining wefts of our research projects, research goals, and research partnerships. So all of our work comes from these vertical warps and these statements that drive our work. And I can talk about those in other presentations. And we actually have a academic publication that we've just submitted that we can also share that describes this weaving process much more. So overall, we have 3 different connections. Our project is called Connections, and we are all about connections. So we're about hydrologic connections, about how groundwater and surface water connect, about people-water connections, so how we can be more engaged and in relationship to the watershed of Xwulqw'selu, and how we can connect this water science with how water decisions are made in this evolving co-governance structure. The 3 principles of our research project that really come out of our relationship with the rights holders and partners are to take a whole of watershed approach. So this includes all geographically the whole watershed, as well as thinking about not just the physical landscape, but also communities and ecosystems. We also take a very broad academic approach of taking a whole of science approach. So we're hydrologists, but also we're working in a very community-based and participatory way of doing watershed science. And finally, we try to make a relationship, an ongoing collaborative yet independent relationship with the Watershed Sustainability Planning process. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to Kristina to describe her work.
Thanks, Tom. So we've been working with community in the Xwulqw'selu watershed since 2021, which is already wild to believe it's been that long. And I just kind of take a minute to share what we've been up to, what community has been up to, and a lot of the good work that's been happening. So in that 4 summers of community monitoring, that has included obviously the groundwater surface water interactions, but also taking the time to record participants or the volunteers' experience of that. So doing that through photo journaling or photo voice. Some of the data we've collected alongside the monitoring program. So a lot of flow data, at different significant points or significant tributaries along the way, different transects, so that we can sort of get an idea of what's the geology and the stream bed type there. And then as well as duplicating some of the community monitoring that's happening, again, just testing that robustness and seeing how far we can carry it through. And a big part of that, I mean, really did start heavy on the science side, but we've taken the time to incorporate just how important that interviewing process is and reflecting back on, are we advancing along with community, not just the science, but the community values as well. So how did we do that? Well, it started off really simply with 12 volunteers and a citizen science app called Anecdata. And the idea was just a really rapid survey sample. So going to a site, doing the temperature, the connectivity, very basic stream depth, width, and then a few descriptors. And that's, I mean, the basics of it, right? Trying to keep it simple, but also keeping it robust is a balance or a line that we've sort of walked along the way. And we've learned a lot through that process, right? So in the sort of first year that we started from, some key highlights was even just changing perception, changing this notion that these really small streams, you know, often not as aesthetic as the main stem, where lots of people already have a relationship and a connection to. Those are also really important. Tim Kolchinsky said it best: ditches are never just ditches. And again, really getting a sense of how much people care, how much they are committed to building that relationship both with others in their community and changing the narrative of their watershed and how they understand it. As we sort of expanded the study and built it out more, so going from just the lower watershed to eventually the whole watershed, getting this idea that there are specific tributaries that are contributing more than you might expect. Sometimes we say they sort of punch above their weight. Those include ones like Wild Deer with the West Xwulqw'selu, Petrolis. And in 2023, we also added in some of those transects I was talking about. So we were using those initial sites, the 75 that we had. We also then did longitudinal walking along the river and trying to place those spot sites or those point samples, excuse me, in context of what was going on around them and how representative they are. And lastly, just a really big highlight is that we've had over 2,500 observations by more than 70 community members over the course of 4 years. If you rethink data collection, not think about how much time was out there, think about how much, in a sense of a loss, but think about it in how many experiences were had over the course of those 25 observations, which is really invaluable. So just to share a few key results along the way, I would really happy to say that it actually worked. There was a few little moments of doubt along the way, or you're trying to build something, or not from scratch, but recreate pieces and use them in a new way. And so, yeah, this simple method does have the ability to identify groundwater contributions to stream. So just as one quick example here, this is an example from Glenora or Kelvin Road. And what you're looking at is, this is the course of the 4 years throughout the summer of sampling. Each of those color bars represents one sampling taken by a volunteer. And so that is, the width is kind of like a 7 day. So the idea being that if you were trying to get equal weekly sampling, yes, you can see there are some patches, there are some missing pieces, but just in general, without enforcing a strict regime, with giving volunteers time to fit this into their daily lives, and working as crews of 2 to 3, they were able to get really fairly good data. And then also, what are we actually experiencing? So those different colors have different meanings. The blue are streams that kept flowing. Green are ones that slowed down and kind of transitioned to what we call standing water, and red are ones that went dry, right? So here we can see at this location too that it went dry in 2021 and 2023. Anecdotally, that is tied to the 2 years where we did have the temporary fish protection order go in. So again, those were lower flow years, and this stream indicated that, weeks ahead of when that order went in. So a lot of work still to be done with this, but just showing that some of those relationships are starting to pull out indicators that might be useful later on. Another key result is that after having assessed all of these major tributaries, or as many as that were feasibly accessible, really we can see that a lot of them are gaining, even in the driest times in summer. And so what that means is that it's not about streams that are switching from losing to gaining, from gaining to losing in that winter to summer, but it's that the sort of cup is empty, right? So how do we then shift our management expectations to match that, right? Things, we can't make them better if we don't understand how they're naturally sort of functioning along the way. There are some places that do go dry, and that can behave in different ways. So the first one I want to point out is that some streams just before they go dry, these would most likely be indicated as losing streams. So that's the sort of red one you can see at the top there. And those ones, they get really warm before they go dry, indicating that it's not locally connected to the groundwater table before that happens, versus in the upper watershed, the example there is from Fellows Creek. And that one is cold right until it momentarily disappears, right? So there still was a local connection to groundwater, but you could just think about it, the whole water table having dropped below. Another key result coming from this, and thinking about how things are working in the system, is that this, again, very broad categorization. But in general, when we have bedrock with shallow soil depth, excuse me, those are relying heavily on groundwater pretty much right from the get-go, early spring, even before our sampling season starts, essentially. And with them, they rely on groundwater sooner, but they have a lower flow, but a more consistent flow throughout the summer. In contrast, where we have sort of sand and gravel or thicker soil depth tied to it, we have overall a larger amount of flow in the springtime, but it dwindles, it decreases quite a bit, and you can see that's transitioning from relying on that snow melt, that freshet, and then becoming more and more reliant on groundwater. And so again, pairing up how do these behave and how can we pair our interactions with them accordingly. Another big key result is that really 80 to 90% of our stream flow is coming from the upper watershed in the summertime, in that critical August period when our water is so needed by so many different people and so many different organisms. And so when we think about sort of manage that, tying that in, we need that that's disproportionately important in the summertime. Maybe that's the driving home statement. In the wintertime, it's more equally distributed, but the summertime, the upper watershed is absolutely critical to those flows. And lastly, really just want to reflect on the amazing work that the volunteers have done, and that if there's already a will and a desire there to contribute to stewardship, to build capacity, and it does a lot of different things, through that interview process with our partners, with our volunteers, with other community members. It was certainly a huge learning experience for me to see the growth of what could come out of it. And then also to see what it was providing back for them, right? It's not just about the data. It's not just about the numbers. For lack of a better way to say it, people really want to help, right? And so they need to just know, they need something to grab onto in order to achieve that. So very, very pleased with all of that work. And yeah, there are lots of things that we'd like to offer from this work moving forward. So the first just being, data is never just data, but data is knowledge and what you can do with it, right? So there's a massive amount of data collected from this. There's over 4,000 monitoring points. There are flow measurements taken every 2 to 3 weeks over the last 3 years of 17 of the major tributaries and 2 points on the main stem. There are data loggers placed in for getting that really finer data, right? So while there's the parts that we're analyzing, there's so much that could be used from this, whether you're looking for cold water habitat, whether it's different sort of planning things, and also, the key points from me taken out of this. And it really does have the chance to complement palettes of knowledge and tie some of those things together, which we've already seen in some ways over the course of the years. Another thing that is existing in that community right now is an engaged and committed network, excuse me. There was a huge amount of reluctance when we ended it this year. And, at some point I do have to write everything up, but there are people that want to keep this going and are willing to find ways to do that, right? So whether it's this form of monitoring or something else that needs to be done, there is that potential there, which is really beautiful and something that shouldn't be taken lightly. Also, again, we didn't reinvent the wheel, but we've taken some existing parameters of how to measure groundwater surface water interactions and are very much willing to sort of engage that with authority holders or take those approaches and get them integrated in the work that needs to come. Long-term monitoring is going to be a solution, or is going to be needed in the solutions moving forward. And there's already a lot of good places there that we can work from. And then also there is the opportunity to use some of the sites. I mean, a better way to say that is that we did a massive inventory. That's not necessarily for long-term monitoring, but there is the ability to pick out some key sites of what we could use that for. The caveat on that, I would say, is that the purpose of the long-term monitoring really needs to be defined. Is it for cold water habitat? Is it for a certain reaching critical flow volumes, right? Like those are different goals that would then require different sites. So definitely hoping to pass on as much of this as possible moving forward. And with that, I think I'll pass it back to you, Tom.
Okay. Thank you for continuing to watch and listen. We've already kind of shared quite a bit, so I was just going to suggest if you're watching this at home to maybe just pause for a second and look out the window or think of the last time you were down by the Xwulqw'selu or another of your favorite uh, creeks or rivers. Just kind of think about what you've learned already so far, because we're going to go off in another direction here, which is modeling. So pause the video for a second, but please do come back. So here we are. Thank you for pausing. And we're going to talk about our modeling work across the watershed. And I'm going to give an overview of that, and then David is going to kind of lean into and describe kind of the key results. And this is really work that's been led mostly by David, and I'll describe a little bit more about that. So why do we do modeling, first of all? I think the most basic reason is that it helps us learn about the whole watershed, going back to some of our original goals of our research, especially when and where we're not monitoring. So the times of year and the locations where we're not monitoring. So we're going to describe why we did this modeling work, what did we create, and how did we develop these models, and how we're moving towards an interactive web-based app. So overall, as I mentioned, this work was led by David Serrano. And then the other kind of key person was Xianggu Park from Texas A&M University, who's really an international leading expert in this type of groundwater surface water modeling using this type of model that we'll describe in a minute called SWOT ModFlow. So the goals and why we did this work was to better understand the hydrologic processes at these times and places we're not monitoring, to recommend and develop a tool that could be used in planning and policy making, and to complement the amazing work that the stream teams and Kristina was just describing that is already collected in the field, and a broader Kauts and knowledge and other data and knowledge being collected and understood by both authority holders. So overall, what we created was what's called a calibrated groundwater surface water model, and I'll describe a little bit more about what calibration is in a minute. An interactive website and app is what we're developing, and we have a report that we're going to release about the development of this model. So the modeling is a complicated process, and it's important to follow kind of standard procedures, which is really what we've done. And those procedures are laid out in this slide here. So developing a conceptual model, first of all, of the Xwulqw'selu. So that's how, as scientists, we imagine and how we visualize the key processes in the watershed. We need to select the most appropriate modeling software, incorporate the best available input data, then calibrate the model. And what calibration is changing the parameters of the model, so the numbers of each of the types of variables in the model, so that it fits and is consistent with the observations in the field. And we'll describe a little bit more about that in a minute. We then compared to monitoring data that Kristina just described, improved it for forestry parameters, and we have ongoing model runs and simulations of past land use, water use, and climate. So this is our conceptual model of the Xwulqw'selu, which really can be improved by others working in the watershed. This is a kind of high-level conceptual model of the upper, middle, and lower watershed, and all the kind of land use and water use aspects. And then below the surface, in the different parts of the watershed, we have different types of aquifers. In the upper watershed, we just have primarily crystalline rock with shallow soils, as Kristina was describing. And in the lower watershed, we have other geological units and deeper soils and obviously flatter topography as well. So there's differences between the upper, middle, and lower watershed that are built into this whole of watershed model. Then we had to do the kind of challenging task of selecting the most important and appropriate model. And I'm not going to walk through all of this whole table, but I just want to show you it, just to describe the type of work that we did in selecting this model. So the model that we selected was SWOT ModFlow, which is really one of the most widely recognized and well-used models for this type of land use and water use assessment, especially around agricultural and forested watersheds and groundwater surface water interactions. So the SWOT mod flow model is a very appropriate model, and internationally, it's the most used for groundwater surface water modeling. It incorporates mathematically all the important elements of the water budget. So for the Xwulqw'selu, this includes precipitation, recharge, stream flow, evapotranspiration, as well as groundwater surface water interactions and groundwater extraction for pumping. So it brings together all the important aspects of the water cycle and the hydrologic cycle, as it is in the Xwulqw'selu style, as well as the land and water use. So it's also important that in this way, SWOT ModFlow can model the three most important drivers of change over the whole watershed: land use, climate change, and water use. And that's what we're moving towards, modeling models that compare through time and in the past these different impacts. So SWOT ModFlow is kind of a mouthful, but it's actually two different models that are coupled or combined together. And they're both really well-recognized, well-tested and used models. The SWOT is mostly for water flows and hydrology and agricultural use at the surface. So some of the key processes here in the brackets of SWOT is what SWOT is using or being used for in the model. And then below the surface, the model is ModFlow, which is the standard groundwater model internationally. So this modeling package combines the strengths of two well-tested and well-used models in an iterative and continuous way. And this is a little bit more about what the model looks like under the hood. So there are these two different models that are being connected. You can see the connections in these arrows. And on the left-hand side is what the SWOT model looks like. So there's a whole series of small little watersheds or basins called hydrologic response units, or HRUs. So in our model of the Xwulqw'selu watershed, we're going over the whole watershed, and we're going into such fine detail that there's over 2,000 of these small little basins that then get combined into smaller sub-basins, and then the whole of the Xwulqw'selu. And on the right-hand side, we have the mathematical grid for the subsurface. So this is a grid of over 6,000 cells. Again, very detailed work in both the surface and subsurface mathematical domain of the model. So then into that mathematical domain of the surface and subsurface, we add the best openly available data. And so this is for land use, for soils, for aquifers, for topography, for climate use, and water use. And so we combine all of these into the model, and we then compare that model to existing observations. So we've compared it to both stream flow as measured at 3 different gauges, especially the main gauge of the Xwulqw'selu, and to groundwater levels that are both static, which don't change through time, but also the few groundwater observation wells, which for the last few years have been monitoring the varying water table throughout the year. So we use all of these observations to change the parameters within the model to make the best possible model for the Xwulqw'selu for a decade from 2013 to 2022. So we're using the observations that we know to make the best mathematical model. And then once we have this calibrated model, we can compare that to the monitoring data from 2022. That was the main field season where a lot of data was collected over the whole watershed at the same time, during the same time frame as we were running the hydrologic model. So we've done that, and we'll show you those results in a minute. And then we also improved that calibrated model with appropriate forest and forestry parameters. So as I mentioned, SWOT is really effective in simulating trees and tree growth and all of the hydrologic processes that are involved in trees. So there's the roots going down into the subsurface, tapping into either soil moisture or groundwater, depending on where the water table is. That tree is then transpiring water through the tree, and so we have and there's evaporation from the soil or the tree itself. So we're simulating the evapotranspiration and recharge of the areas of the watershed that were the forestry, and so we've modified the model for some key parameters. This is just a little nerdy for a minute here about the initial leaf area index, the initial biomass, and another important variable, plant heat units for maturity. So these variables are important for describing how the trees grow in the model. So that's the most important point to note here, that we're simulating different parts of the tree growth evolution from being logged to young trees, medium age trees, and older trees, as well as agriculture. And so we're dynamically modeling the growth of trees in this model and how that affects the watershed. The last thing that we're working on, don't have results yet to share, is that we're simulating land and water use for the 1950s to the present. So we've collected land use data from Landsat and other sources from 5 different time slices from 1954, 1972, 2000, 2010, and 2020, and are simulating the impact of land use and water use in those times. And this model, like data, like Kristina was describing with the monitoring data, spits out an incredible amount of data. So it's actually quite a challenge to figure out how best to look at the data. So there's just a couple images of the types of data that the model spits out and outputs. And just to give a flavor of some of the things we could offer, again, to the authority holders or others that are interested in the watershed. So this is an output of the different aspects of the water cycle through time. So this is on the horizontal axis is different years from 2015 to 2023. And all the different colored bars are the different parts of the water balance. So from precipitation, soil moisture, surface water, lateral flows, groundwater flow to streams, etc. So we can track all of these different flows across the watershed. And we're just highlighting here a wet and a dry year as an example. That's the water balance through time, but we can also view the model output over both time and space. So these are maps of the whole watershed. We can zoom in to specific places and look at the distribution in a map view, or we can look at different variables as they vary through time, which you can see in the bottom graph here. Again, the stream flow as it's being simulated from 2013 to 2022. So I'm going to hand it over to David to further describe the key modeling results that we've derived for the model.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for giving us a little bit of the explanation about the setup of the model and the calibration that we have been performed. So one of the key results that we are going to talk about is about how we are representing these high flows and low flows in the model. And in this graph, we can observe the observed data that we have collected from different stations. And we can observe also the simulation of the model. So the observed data is in red and the best model simulated that we have is in blue. Also, we have one band that is the gray band that is prior ensemble, and we have around 10,000 simulations there that we can see a lot of lines there. And after the ensemble, that is the gray band that is aligned with the observed flows, indicating that we have a successful calibration. So here with this, we can feel more secure that we are studying the low flows and all the parameters and all the processes in the hydrologic realm of how how this model is connected. And one of the key results that we have here to highlight is the connection between the data that we are simulating with the data that was measured. So as Tom was explaining before, this connection that we are comparing here happened in 2022. And here we have all the places that we were monitoring the stream flow and also the simulated flow for these places. So as you can see here, there are consistent measures between the stream flow across the watershed. And the other part of these results is that we have also the analysis between what we call gaining and losing streams. So as Kristina was explaining before, most of the streams are gaining, that are all the blues that you see here in the left. And there are some few of them that are losing, that are the ones that are red very little in the right. These are some uncommon losing streams. And the important thing to check here, as Kristina was explaining, is how this behavior of gaining is affecting the summer low flows. As you can see here in the axis, in the x-axis, we have the names of all of the places that Kristina was monitoring with the people of the Xwulqw'selu watershed. And another key results here that we have is related with this interaction between groundwater and surface water. So this is very important because we can see here, especially in the whole watershed, how we are gaining, losing, or we have no significant contributions to the stream flow. So as you can see here, for example, in August, we have different gaining places, and we also have no significant contribution, that are the yellow points. These yellow points can be either gaining or losing to the stream, because they are between 1 and -1 meter cubes per day. In December, we have for winter, we have more precipitation, and we have, with that, we recharge the aquifer. That are the points that are in brown. And also we have water that is going to the stream. One of the things to highlight here is to understand that when we have more water, there are more possibilities to recharge the aquifers, right? But also, according to the type of land use that we have, there are also the movement of the runoff could be slower or faster, giving more possibilities or less possibilities to recharge the aquifers. So another key result that we have here is related with the groundwater recharge, which is very important to understand how this recharge is happening in the whole watershed, considering the precipitation, and also we have some key things to understand here according to the soil type, the slope that we have, the land use, and the climate condition. These patterns are going to change. That's why you see here in September there are like few shadows of light blue, but in December we have darker blues in some areas, that are when we have more possibility to recharge and to have more flow going to the aquifer. With that, then we have the four key modeling results, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how this is a contribution and how this is important as a calibrated model that can help us to understand the watershed and see different applications that this may have to the study of the low flows and different aspects that are connected to the low flows. This model is in GitHub. That is a free platform that you can check, and you can also download the model and modify some parameters with some people that understand how they are connected, the parameters, and actually play and try different things with the model. So the things that we are offering are five. One of the things is to help to understand the current reality and the historical changes that we are uh, working further. And we also can evaluate the impact of different options across the whole watershed. That's some of the things that we are working right now. And in the close future, we will be sharing more about this. We can go to streams and explore what will happen if we have different type of land use, different types of water use, and different types of climate, how this is going to affect the low flows, and how this is connected to different parts of the watershed. And we can also provide evidence to reduce the risk in decision making. So although this model is not going to give you exactly the number of, for example, the quantity of water that you need to take in a specific season, is going to give you a broad understanding of the watershed, and it's going to allow you to take better decisions when you have to decide. And in the future, is going to give us a better understanding of the impact of these three drivers that Tom explained before. That was some of the key aspects to select this SWOT mode flow model that we are working on. I'm gonna hand it to Tom to close.
All right, you guys want to come in? Yeah, I just wanted to close by thanking you for paying attention so far into this video. We hope it was useful and interesting. And again, I encourage you to think about what we've shared, those key results, how we did it, why we did it, and put it in the place of your understanding of the watershed or the watershed that you live in. And we'd love to hear any of your reflections on what were the key kind of things that you got out of this video in the comments to this video, or by reaching out to the research team. So thank you again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you out in the watershed.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.